You're listening to the Waypoint TV Podcast Network, brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors.
Hey everyone, this is Captain Steve Roger from Into the Blue TV. And as soon as I feel a little break from this heat, I know that hunting season's upon us. Actually, the first time I ever went hunting, a buddy took me. Wasn't my father or my grandfather. In fact, I took my father on his very first hunt. Well, Academy Sports and Outdoor Stores has everything to gear up for the field for less. Plus, you can shop a wide selection of ammo, shotguns, deer corn, rifle, feeder, game cameras, camo, and more from the brands you trust. Text HUNT24 to 22369 to take $20 off a $100 purchase when you shop hunting supplies at academy.com. Need a hunting license? Pick it up in store while you're shopping.
What's your favorite hunting tradition? Is it the thrill of the early morning, the sound of the woods coming alive? My personal favorite, the smell as the seasons change. Who was it that first took you out on your first hunt? Maybe it was your dad, a grandparent, a good friend. Hunting season is more than just a time of year. You know this. It's a way of life passed down through generations. And now it is finally here. Whether you're heading out for the first time or for the 50th, Academy Sports and Outdoors has everything you need to gear up for the field and do it for less. Find the ammo, shotguns, and rifles that fit your hunting style. Grab game cameras and camo to ensure you're fully prepared, all from the brands you trust, all in one place. Text HUNT24, that's HUNT24, to 22369, again 22369, to take $20 off your $100 purchase when you shop hunting supplies at academy.com. And if you need a hunting license, pick it up in store while you're shopping. It's just one more way Academy Sports and Outdoors makes hunting season easier.
On this episode of The Rookies, we've got a Louisiana Cajun who started hunting as a way to reconnect with his culture. He's got some great stories, some good advice, and a passion for wild game. You're not going to want to miss this episode. So, laissez le bon temps rouler.
My first shotgun I ever got was a side-by-side shotgun from the 1910s that my grandfather's father used to bring game meat home to feed the family, you know. And my grandmother has had a catering business and she has 2 published cookbooks. Her cookbooks have wild game sections in them. It's just a natural part of the Cajun culture and a normal part of a South Louisiana table that you might find yourself eating around if you get invited to somebody's house. You're probably going to have venison or maybe some wild hog or maybe alligator, you know. There's all kinds of crazy stuff, and what it means to me is, you know, I'm not going to recreate some of my grandmother and my grandfather's favorite dishes with a store-bought hog, you know, because I remember the dish being deer meat or I remember it being hog meat, you know, wild off the land. And if you want to really experience your family recipes the way they were designed to be, you have to go out and you got to get an animal. And that's kind of what it means. It keeps me to my roots, to my grandfather bringing food home for his family, to the recipes I tasted growing up and wanting to recreate. You know, it's a part of my culture that I'd never really got to experience because I moved away from Louisiana at a young age. So that's a big reason of getting into hunting, is to kind of capture a piece of my culture I wasn't raised with.
Welcome to the Wild Fish and Game Podcast's new show, The Rookies, presented by Harvesting Nature, a podcast series exploring the food journeys of adult onset hunters, anglers, and foragers. I'm your host, Ken Chapman. I'm a newbie hunter, a poor angler, wannabe forager, amateur cook, and full-time eater who is on a journey to know where my food comes from and have some great meals with good friends along the way. This series is for us and by us, the first-timers, the newbies, the rookies. In each episode, we'll meet new hunters, anglers, and foragers, real people discussing real food on a real adventure to learn how to put wild fish, game, and forageables into everyday meals. We'll learn what inspired them and how they're building their knowledge and skills. We'll talk about their experiences in the field and at the table. Most importantly, what keeps them coming back for more.
Well, my name is Adam Herpin. I was born in Louisiana, but I moved around most of my life. But being from Louisiana, my whole family was really into hunting. So by the time I got old enough to kind of return to the South, it became a passion for me. I'd previously been really into the outdoors when I was in the Coast Guard and did a lot of fish calls and things like that, but it was mostly fishing, and we got to take some cool trips up to Alaska. So just experiencing the wild wilderness. When I came home and got back to the South, I was like, man, I need to get back outdoors, and hunting seemed like the prime way to do it because my wife and I are both foodies, and I just wanted to bring home some of the best meat I could.
Now, Adam, adult onset hunters get started for a lot of different reasons. What was the big one for you?
The primary one, I think, is more an ethical one, whereas my wife was a vegetarian when I met her, and I had always been a lover of animals, and so kind of questioned why I eat meat and things like that. And so one of the big ones to me was, number one, I loved wild game meat because my grandparents and my uncles and my cousins all hunted, so I grew up eating it, but I'd never actually hunted big game. Of course, I'd done fishing and small game like rabbits and birds and things, but I'd never done big game hunting. And I was doing kind of an internal search and said, I don't know if I could justify continuing to eat meat if I'm pretty much paying a hitman to kill the animal for me. So that's what really made me want to get in and go out and kill a big game animal to see if I enjoyed the meat enough to take that life. Like I told my wife when I was going for the first hog hunting trip that I did, she said, I hope you have fun. And I said, yeah, don't say that too early. I might come back and we might be vegetarians from now on out,
Tell us about your first big hunt.
As far as my first big game hunt goes, it was a course, as you know, the Harvesting Nature course that they did to kind of get people into being outdoors and into teaching them how to shoot, how to process the game, basically from beginning to end of the whole process. And so I figured that was the easiest way for me to dive in, was to kind of have a structured learning course. And so I went in nervous, not knowing what to expect, but when I got to the camp, we zeroed our rifles and found out my rifle had an issue. If I had just been doing it on my own, I don't know if I ever would have known that. And then if I tried to take a shot on an animal and got a bad hit, I probably wouldn't want to go back to hunting again, if that was my first time. But going there and having real pros, set you up, have you take a few shots, make sure your gear's working all right. And since my rifle actually was a mechanical issue, I ended up having to switch it out for one of the instructors, and so that was really cool. But when I switched it out, the instructor's rifle had a suppressor on it, which the laws regarding suppressors is the instructor had to come with me and sit in the stand. So while I was expecting my first hunt to be solo, I actually got pushed into a scenario where I had to be with somebody because I had an NFA firearm with me, and the person who owned it had to be with me, physically when I had possession of it. So I think I was a little bit relieved that I didn't have to do it by myself, and so it was sobering getting out to the actual field, because it's one thing sitting in a lodge and shooting at a target range, and you have a nice luxury pool next to you, and you can go into the air conditioning and hang out and have a beer. But it's something else when they kind of drop you out in the wilds, and there's just kind of a hunting stand about 100 yards out, and you walk to, you climb the ladder and get in. Your mind goes to a different headspace. And so it was just fascinating getting up there and kind of talking with the instructor. It happened to be the shooting instructor I was with, so he was just kind of giving me some guidance on how to set up, which I was super thankful for. And once the pigs came, I started shaking. I didn't know if I was ready to pull the trigger on one. I had several misses at the range earlier until we figured out that it was my rifle that was messing up. And so I was just so nervous and kind of like apprehensive. But, as soon as the first 3 pigs came out, I was like, that's what I'm here for, So I picked the rifle, I put the scope up to my eye, and I start looking, and the guy next to me, the instructor, he said, hold on, give it some time. Because the ones that come out early, usually, you could have some sows or you have some small ones, but he wanted me to wait like a few minutes since it looked like the sounder was coming out, but he said they don't always come out all at once. And so he's like, take a minute. And then, 3 or 4 minutes later, this big old 160-pound sow came out. And I was just like, that's the one. So I put my sights on the target. I did breathing as I'd always learned for shooting. And I put a perfect shot right through the hog's heart. And it keeled over right there and started kicking. And I knew it was down for good. So at that point, the adrenaline just kind of rushed me, and I was just like shaking. Like, it was such a wild experience to actually take an animal's life and to know that you just did that. So, a roller coaster of emotions, and I didn't know how I'd feel after killing it, but I felt perfectly fine after it. I think that was because it was a good hit. I think if I had gotten a bad hit, I would have felt a little differently my first go around. So it helped that it was a clean hit. Eventually I did have to put the rifle down because it started to get dark and it was time to go down and check it out. And so, unloaded the rifle, got out of the stand, which is a little bit awkward if you're not used to climbing, these ladder stands and everything. It's a little bit awkward if you're not accustomed to it. So, just getting our gear out and everything, and I'm still kind of shaking from the adrenaline. And so I'm not really even thinking about what I'm about to do, which is walk up on the animal I just killed. I was just more thinking in the moment, trying not to fall off a 30-foot ladder and break my spine. So I got down, and then it was like, all right, let's go look. The instructor I was with was like, all right, you ready? I was like, yep, 100%. And we walked over to it, and at that point I was just excited to get my hands on it, to see a feral hog up close, to put my hands on it. And the first thing I noticed walking up to it is they stink. And they're living in the wild, and for their scent marking they tend to pee down the back of their legs, which it picks up scents from the scent glands that they have on the back of their legs, which is the reason they pee down the back of their legs. So it smells pretty strong when you start getting close to them. And I was blown away by the size from the hunting stand. That big old sow didn't look nearly as big as when I was down on the ground next to it. So that was surprising to me. And then just rubbing it and feeling this warm body that was just alive, it's a sobering moment. So I think the first thing I felt there was gratitude, thankful that I could take the resource, and that the resource that the hog gave up its life so that I may feed myself and my family. And so that was kind of like a gratitude. And then understanding the circle of life was the next one. All animals die rough deaths. The easiest death an animal's ever going to get is the bullet of a hunter. Otherwise it's going to be the teeth of a mountain lion clenched around its neck, or starvation. Not a very pretty death. No deer or hog has ever died laying at home in bed surrounded by their family. So it was easy for me to look at it as a righteous kill, and I was very thankful for the animal being on the landscape that I may harvest it and nourish my body.
The images of a industrial food system hitman and a old deer on its deathbed surrounded by family, those are going to stay with me. Now, you and I had met for the first time at this pig camp. What was it like for you to come back after your first successful harvest later that night?
You get back to a hunting camp and everybody's waiting to see who was successful and who shot something, and to weigh them and measure up how big they are compared to the other hunters. So we put mine up. Mine was the biggest for the first day, but it got beat out the next day. So I ended up second place with the biggest hog. But just a wild experience getting it up on the gambrels and taking the weight of it from the gambrels, and then just, you know, watching Adam, the guy who taught the butchering, go to work on this thing like a professional. And then it was just a slow process. You know, I was kind of working one side of the animal with Adam, the butcher that was teaching us how to clean him, working the other side of the animal, and we were just kind of going concurrently. I was following his guidelines, and every cut he made I tried to mimic. My cuts were a heck of a lot uglier than his were, but it was a slow job, and he got through it way quicker than I got through mine. But, you know, just once you have the meat cleaned and skinned and everything, it's generally normal practice to leave it hanging for, you know, at least overnight for the animal to go through rigor and then the muscles to soften again, which makes the butchery part a lot easier. So we went through that process, but luckily the group that we were hunting with had already gone and harvested some pigs, which was our meals while we were at the camp. So we got to go in and see some of the cuts that Adam, the butcher, was explaining to us as we were cutting the animals open. You know, we got to go in and see those cuts being prepared by the other Adam, who was cooking for us, and he put together some amazing meals. You know, I can't recall each of the meals he did. I think one of my favorites, he did a Thai dish, or it might have been Korean or something, but it was like a stir-fry pork dish, and that was freaking amazing. We did a schnitzel on one of my nights to cook, because we had rotational nights. You know, one night Group A cooked and the next night Group B cooked. So it was really fun. The night I cooked, we did schnitzel, and so it was interesting seeing, like, we using a fairly tender cut. I think it was from the leg, and just seeing it out. Number one, when you first look at it, it doesn't look like pork. It looks like beef. And it's super, super red. It's not even close to store-bought pork, which is, you know, they call it the other white meat. But, I mean, this pork that we're looking at is dark red, like rich, looks almost like a steak, but a little bit different, you know, because it's not a cow. And so automatically you knew you had to treat it a little bit differently than you would a store-bought pork chop. Man, I can't imagine it. It makes the hunt well worth it.
The holidays are coming, and everything's aglow. Give your loved one a reason to sparkle with jewelry from Blue Nile. Right now, Blue Nile is offering special Black Friday and Cyber Monday deals. Save up to 50% on the season's most stunning trends. Or keep it classic with an endless selection of bold gold styles, gemstone jewelry, and eternally stylish diamond pieces. Shop now for up to 50% off jewelry at BlueNile.com, the original online jeweler. That's BlueNile.com, BlueNile.com.
WWE Universe. The countdown is on. Monday Night Raw is coming to Netflix. This is WWE superstar Damian Priest. And starting January 6th, Netflix brings you the biggest stars, the juiciest angles, and the high-flying action of WWE Raw that you know and love. There's never been a better time to step in the ring and stream WWE Raw live only on Netflix, premiering Monday, January 6th.
It sounds like you were really getting a lot out of the cooking at the Wild Pig Camp. What other lessons did you take home with you?
My wife does most of the cooking, and she was so excited to get a pig that I was like, we just need to do the low and slow method, because you can cook a hog for 4 hours and it's going to fall apart in your mouth. And so that's kind of what we did for the entirety of the meat I brought home. She did maybe one or two cuts that it was like chewing on rubber when we tried to cook it quick, like a steak or a chop or something. And it was like eating rubber, but my dog really loved it because he ended up eating the rest that we couldn't finish. And then after that, we went to the low and slow method, like doing it like roasts, or she would just kind of do like a smothered, you know how you do a smothered pork chop in a pan with some broth or something and just kind of simmer it on the stovetop. So we do it in the oven, we do it on the stovetop, but we simmer it for 2, 3, sometimes even 4 hours. And then by the time you're done, like the last one she did was a roast we did in the oven in our cast iron pan. man, by the time we took it out 4 hours later, the thing was falling apart when you put a fork in it. And the flavor, she did some basic salt and pepper seasoning. They say whenever you get a game animal, you should use the natural herbs and seasonings that game animal will already eat. So we were using kind of like sage and thyme, primary flavor we tried to use, and then it was just salt and pepper and some Tony Chachere's, because we're good Cajuns and we like the Cajun seasoning. And but other than that, just sparse. We didn't do a lot of seasoning to it because we really wanted to taste the meat, and it's indescribable. If you've never had game meat, I highly suggest finding somebody who hunts and tasting it, because it's going to be different from any type of store-bought meat you've ever experienced. And I grew up eating game meat, so it wasn't so strange for me, but my wife, who had not really ever eaten it before, she described it to me as a cross between farm-raised pig and beef, and like the best beef you've ever had.
So be real with me. Wild game, and wild pig in particular, often take a hard knock as being gamey. What's your take on all that?
You never know what your animal's going to taste like. You taste one hog, you haven't tasted them all. It depends on how big they were, how much they ran right before they died, what they ate for breakfast that morning. All different things can change the flavor of the meat. So that's one of the exciting things. And from what I've seen, what I've experienced is some of the gamier cuts, if you're worried about that gaminess and you don't want it, the low and slow method, I didn't even notice. But the big one that helped with, some of the hindquarter ones, because that meat is close to where their scent glands are, those could be a little more flavorful in not a pleasant way. What we ended up doing there is making like ground pork or ground beef and mixing it into some other dish. Like, my wife made the best dirty rice I've ever tasted my entire life from the hog I brought home, and it was one of the gamier pieces of meat, which is right by one of the scent glands, and she just cooked it down for forever. She cooked this roast until it was almost nothing, and mixed it in with rice and onion, and made this great dirty rice mix, and the gaminess wasn't there at all. Because you put other flavors in there, you're eating a different dish. You're not just eating the pork straight. It's kind of a protein within a bigger vessel as you eat it, so it's not nearly as concentrated. So that's the way we got around some of the gamier foot cuts of meat, but for the most part, we didn't find the hog I got to be super gamey. We mostly just put them in the oven, cooked them low and slow, or put them on a pan and, smothered them. So put some broth and let it simmer in the pan on the stovetop for a few hours. And man, it's just tender, beefy tasting pig. When I go on a binge and eat game meat for a week or two, I go back to eating a regular store-bought pork chop, and it doesn't taste like anything. So when you cook it with some of these Cajun preparations, which are oftentimes, like making boudin, where you grind it up and you mix it with rice and all kinds of green onion, other seasonings and whatnot. You put liver and kidney and a lot of the offal that, a lot of people won't keep. That stuff gets ground up along with the rest of the meat, and, they stretch out the intestines, and they turn the intestines inside out. They scrub them with like a salt scrub and everything, basically, and then stuff the casings back in. Boudin is one of the best things you'll ever taste. But if you get store-bought, you're getting a collagen casing. You're not getting the intestine. You're getting a grocery or a commercially raised pig and not a wild pig. So the boudin you get made in somebody's backyard out of a burner stove with a pot on top is going to taste very different from the boudin you get when you walk into the roadside Hebert's meat market you see off the side of the interstate in South Louisiana. You can buy good stuff there, but it's not going to be exactly the same as a completely wild processed animal in that same preparation. So if you want to really experience your family recipes the way they were designed to be, you have to go out and you got to get an animal.
Now, one of the things that's really important about the Rookies is that we love to share advice and information with other folks who are just getting started. What kind of advice would you have for other folks?
Yeah, so advice that I would have to give to somebody who's interested in doing this kind of things is there's a couple of routes you can go. If you're going to be doing it on your own, I would highly suggest to start small. And I mean, start with small game. Only buy one gun. Make sure you can use the tool that you've bought, as in the gun, and small game is quite a bit more accessible, at least where I am in Texas. There's all kinds of leases for dove. There's all kinds of areas to hunt duck. Squirrel's a lot easier to hit up at the National Forest. It's just the regulations tend to be a little more lax. Maybe not lax is not the right word. Maybe more straightforward. Because large game, you start getting into things where the state is trying to manage herds. And, with hogs, it's real easy. Almost nowhere wants to manage hogs. They want to eradicate them because they're horribly invasive and they cause all kinds of environmental damage to wherever they are. So hogs are easy. So my first suggestion, if you're doing it on your own, is number one, start either with small game or with hogs, because wherever you are, they're probably not regulating hogs as heavily as any other game. So that's probably the easiest. But the number one thing I would say is if you can find a hunting mentor or a group like Harvesting Nature that will walk you through the process, that is, in my opinion, 100% the way to go. And the reason being, I don't know what I don't know. That's kind of the thing you learn in the military when you start learning certain jobs, is you don't know what you don't know. And so, the Harvesting Nature camps were invaluable. I wouldn't have known the first thing about skinning a pig, but I had a professional butcher walk me through it. I would have never known that the screws were loose on my rifle scope and I couldn't get a good zero unless I'd gone with a shooting instructor who actually was a sniper and knows almost everything you could ever want to know about rifles, and said, oh, that's your problem, your screws aren't torqued enough and we don't have a torque wrench, so you can use my rifle. So, that resource is just invaluable. They walk you through step by step, and honestly now I feel so much more confident to go out on my own. So thank you to Harvesting Nature for the opportunities you bring. I've gone to 2 camps so far, and I'm looking forward to I know they started doing duck camps, so I'm really looking forward to getting up to Oklahoma and doing one of their duck camps soon.
Oh, duck is such good eats. I can't wait.
Duck and sausage gumbo, one of the recipes in my grandmother's cookbook. So good, make you slap your mama if you want to look up that cookbook. There's a whole wild game section. She's got parts 1 and 2. But just great recipes, and chicken and sausage duck and sausage gumbo, I should say. If you can do it right with wild mallards, man, there's nothing that beats it.
What's the name of your grandma's cookbook?
So good, make you slap your mama. They used to sell it at Barnes & Noble, but it's about 40 years old now, so I'm not sure if it's still in rotation. But hey, if you can find it online, buy it and give my grandmother a few bucks.
I gotta thank Adam for coming on and sharing his story, and it wouldn't be right without thanking Adam's grandma for inspiring a foodie with a passion for wild game and a reconnection to his culture. Well, I told you this was going to be a good episode now, didn't I? I'm excited to keep hearing from other rookies and building our community as we go along. In the last few years, there have been millions of adult onset hunters, anglers, and foragers who have stepped into the woods looking for game, cast a line to a rising trout, or harvested wild edibles for the first time. Each one of us has a story. We got into hunting, fishing, and foraging to find something. Maybe it was to feel a deep sense of purpose, or to make a connection to nature, seize on a lifelong dream, or simply find a better way to get some good eats. We're going to let a few rookies tell their story, and in those stories, maybe we'll find a little inspiration, build some community, and have a greater connection to things that matter. We'll see you next time on The Rookies, presented by Harvesting Nature.